Last week's episode was about this show. And I asked in that episode if you guys were interested in how I took these photos. And there was a lot of interest in that. So let's do a deep dive in how I take photos in these kinds of situations. And after watching this, you'll be able to do the same. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk It Over. First things first, shooting film in the dark can be very scary because you can't see what you've just done and maybe adjust for mistakes. So in that way, it can be pretty difficult, but trust me, after doing this a couple of times, you'll get more confident and trust your skills. But still, low light, a lot of movement and contrasty scenes because of all those lights doesn't make it easy. So let me help you by telling you exactly how I go about these days. And one thing that's important is the setup. I use my Leica M6, which is a rangefinder camera. In my opinion, that makes focusing quicker and there's also no blackout in the viewfinder. These are pretty important things if you photograph shows like these. And sure, I'm not saying it's impossible on a SLR, definitely not. But I'm just saying that I am quicker with a rangefinder. Also keep in mind that an SLR has a mirror slab, so you probably need some higher shutter speeds than I talk about in this episode. But more on that later. I would also recommend a camera that has an internal light meter. Very important, even though the light isn't continuous. And I'll let you know on a trick that I use a lot at these shows. So we got the Leica M6, now let's take a look at the lenses that I bring with me. The images that are shown in this episode are shot with the 28 and the 50, both from Voigtlander, called the color scope parts. And I've already done a review on both of these lenses on this channel, so check those out if you're interested. Both of these lenses are also a great bang for buck, and as you can see, they produce quality images. I like to have this combo of a 28 and a 50 because with the 28 I can catch a lot of the scene in the frame, but also can get really close to the subject. And with the 28, because it's a wider focal length, you can use slower shutter speeds without getting a lot more motion blur. And of course, the depth of field on a 28 is less shallow than a longer focal length. Also, I just love the look of a 28. On the other hand, if you want to get closer to the subject without physically moving forward, the 50 is perfect. And this also means that you can isolate the subjects a bit more. Just keep in mind, the longer the focal length, the harder it is to nail focus and the easier it is to get some motion blur. And last but not least is the film stock that I pick. This is always a high-speed film like Portra 800 for color or Ilford HP5 pushed to 1600 for black and white. You'll need every extra stop of light to get the highest shutter speed as possible. So a high-speed film is recommended. I don't push my Portra 800 because I do not like the color shifts that happen, but I've also seen some people do it with great results. So you can try that out if you like. And I meter this film at box speed, so set your meter at 800. Portra 800 on its own really reacts great to stage lights, and even got some halation when the light hits the frame at the right angle. If you follow me for a while, then you know that Portra 800 is my favorite film in any situation really, but on days like these, it shines a little extra. Just look at those deep colors. So the Leica M6, a 28, 50, Portra 800, Ilford HP5, that's the setup. Now let's talk about probably the most important part of this episode, the exposure. Keep in mind that every show is different, the intensity of the lights, the amount of light and everything around it. And then it also changes a lot during the show. And I'll show you my technique on how I meter these scenes. First of all, keep your lens wide open during the whole show. My 28 goes to 2.8 and the 50 goes to 2.2. Do not change this because you'll need it and a faster shutter speed is more important. Your camera will rate everything at ISO 800, so a wide open lens will give you the fastest shutter speed possible. Now comes the trick. Point your camera towards the lights, and I know these change quick, but you will see your meter go towards a reading. then only adjust the shutter speed to get your perfect reading. So for instance, the light meter in my camera says when I point it to the light, 1/250th at 2.8 at an ISO of 800. Now you should know that these lights are the brightest part of the image. So slow down your shutter speed by a stop or two. That means that you shoot it at 1/125th or even 1/60th. Now you might think, okay, a slower shutter speed, that means I'm overexposing those lights. Yes, you're right, but because the light meter in your camera meters for middle gray and you're metering the brightest part of the image, you need to adjust for that. Otherwise, the brightest part of the image will be metered as middle gray and you don't want that. But that's pretty technical. You don't have to think about that all the time. Just make sure that when you meter for the brightest part of the image, just add a couple of stops. Film really lets you overexpose by so many stops without losing any detail in the highlights. So definitely don't worry about that. Always make sure that you let in as much light as possible. In other situations where there's a model in front of you, get the light meter reading of him or her. This will probably be a lot slower, like 1/60th or 1/30th. And in this situation, keep it at that shutter speed. Then the lights in your scene will be the brightest and your model will be well lit. But let me show you a couple of frames and show you exactly where I got the reading from, which settings I used and which lens. As you can see, the shutter speed bounces between 1/30th and 1/250th depending on the amount of light in this scene. With both lenses, I wouldn't really go below 1/30th, except if I do want some motion blur, but then it's an artistic choice and it does work sometimes. But to sum it up, wide open lenses at all times, point your camera towards the lights for the wider scenes and slow down the shutter speed by a stop or two. And when you're photographing the artist or the models, point it towards them and shoot it as the reading that you've got. And remember, when in doubt, just use a slower shutter speed. More light is always better than underexposure. This is something that you'll need to practice. And after doing this for a while, you'll trust yourself and even know the exposure setting before getting a reading. Then you'll just look at a scene and think, this must be 1/125th. And then the meter is just a backup or confirmation. The focusing part is really the same as in any situation. Only I wouldn't recommend zone focusing. And if you don't know what zone focusing is, I made an episode just about that. But in short, it just means that you preset your focus. I do not recommend this because at these shows you're shooting wide open. And that leaves a lot less room for error. With a 28 you'll get a lot more in focus than with a 50, but still it's pretty shallow. So focus everything by eye, and with a rangefinder in my case, that makes things a lot easier. But if you're a pro at SLR focusing, go ahead of course. I am just really bad at it. Another really important thing about getting the shots that are worth taking are movement and timing. You can get every exposure setting right, but if you don't read the situation and capture the right moment, it's all for nothing. Just listen to the music. Is there a drop coming? And if so, make sure that you've got your settings right before the moment happens. How are the artists or dancers moving? Can you interact with them? Or do you need to leave them alone? These are all things that you need to consider when you're up there. Normally, dancers, models, or artists will give you a window where you can interact with them, because they also know the importance of it. But you've got to feel it. Also, it's very nice if a person is moving around a lot, you'll know what move they are going to do next. This way you can line it up and get the shot at the perfect timing. Your position as a photographer is also really important. Do you need to be at the back of the venue for this moment in time? Do you need to be dead center, or do you need to be off a little bit? Can you go on the stage for this moment, or does the stage need to be empty? because sometimes it's not preferred to have people on the stage. You can communicate this with the stage manager and ask if it's allowed or not. And if you are, just make sure that you get your shots and leave, because as a photographer, you're not part of the show. But this is of course all experience and you need to practice to get good at it. As with all things in life. A lot of things that I talked about in this episode are creative choices. And of course you can switch up things where you like to. But I think that it's nice to get a good basic understanding and show you guys how I do it. But definitely don't be afraid to do some creative and experimental stuff, because you might end up with some great photos. And to be honest with you, I shoot a lot of film at these shows. It's definitely not strange to me to run through 20 rolls of film on a weekend. So that means that there are a lot of misses on those rolls as well. That's just unavoidable unless you're some kind of superhuman. Your hit rate, so to speak, is just a lot less than normal situations, because everything is changing so quickly with those lights, dancers, artists, you name it. Imagine a scene like this where you need to time your shot with the lights. It's easier to miss it than to hit it. So another trick, a slower shutter speed will help you get a bigger window to catch those lights. If they turn off and on really quick, you'll probably be able to catch them with a shutter speed of 1/30th. And if you're not sure about your exposure, you can also bracket your shots. Take one at 1/250th, one at 1/125th, and so on. This will eat up your film, but it makes sure that you got some options. If you make sure that the first shot is the technique that I explained, then you know when you're scanning your film that it was right. And if so, then you don't have to worry about it the next time. If you want to see my scanning setup and the way that I convert my negatives into positives, then check the description down below, because I'll leave those episodes down there. Also worth checking out. But yes, a lot of misses on the roll. This is totally normal, even for professionals who do this for years. And I even doubt myself sometimes at these shows. Did I really read those scenes right? Shouldn't I leave a little bit more room in the exposure to make sure it's not underexposed? And then I tell myself, trust the process, you've been doing this for years, and the readings are consistent with other shows, same technique, so everything will be fine. And they are. But trust me, everybody who takes photos at scenes like these will doubt themselves from time to time. It's just the experience that will get you back on your feet. But yes, a lot of weird movements, shots where the lights weren't on, and just plainly underexposed shots. These happen a lot. But don't think about those too much. Take a look at the shots that did work out and know that those shots are the shots that you were going for. And if you think that there's room to improve, write down what you think that you need to do differently next time. That is definitely the best way to learn. And if you got any questions left about this, please let me know in the comments down below and I'll do my best to help you. But for now, thanks for watching, and if this episode was helpful in any way, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week. Peace! Oh yeah, and I also got prints in my print shop, so if you want to support me and the channel, that's a great place to do it.